We've been talking a lot about curly hair routines for adults, but I want to switch gears and talk about kids' curly hair, specifically babies and toddlers. Because thanks to the natural hair movement, so many kids today are growing up learning to love their natural hair. But that can be challenging for parents who are trying to figure it out along the way, especially if you don't have curly hair yourself. So I want to start with infants and toddlers before getting into older kids because there are a few important things to understand early on. And if doing your toddler's hair already feels like a struggle, the tangles, the tears, the constant resistance, you're not alone. But it doesn't have to be hard. Before getting into routines, I do want to briefly mention Cradle Cap because this is something a lot of parents deal with in the newborn stage. I actually have a full article on my blog where I break down the exact products I use on my son because I tried a lot of different options that either didn't work or just weren't pleasant to use. So if that's something you're dealing with, I'll link that below for you. Now when it comes to babies and toddlers, their hair is different. It's more delicate, more prone to tangling, and their scalp is much more sensitive, especially in the early stages. As they grow, you might also notice things like dryness or even conditions like eczema. So the products you use really matter. First and foremost, babies and toddlers should not be using adult products. It can be tempting to use certain products on your child's hair, especially if you're a curly hair parent and you found things that work well for you. But it's important to remember that the products we use are often stronger and babies and toddler scalps are still developing and more sensitive. So it's better to stick with products that are gentle and made specifically for them. And now we're in a time where there are actually curly hairlines designed for kids, which makes things a lot easier. You may also notice changes in their hair. Some babies lose their hair during the newborn stage, which is completely normal. Whether or not you cut it is a personal choice, but I chose not to because I wanted to let everything develop naturally. And as their hair grows, it's important to be mindful of styling. Tight styles can put stress on their scalp. So if you're doing buns or simple styles, try to avoid anything that pulls or causes tension. With toddlers, it's important to focus on keeping their hair and scalp healthy and making adjustments as their hair grows. That's what will make the process easier for both of you. Now let's get into a simple wash day routine you can follow. Detangling is usually the hardest part, and depending on your child, it might be easier to start before you even get into the shower. For example, as soon as water hits my toddler's hair, he's ready to get out. So doing a quick pre-detangle first makes the whole process a lot easier. If you do this, always start on damp hair. And that means adding water first, even if you're using a detangling product. Otherwise, the product just sits on top of the hair without helping. Then go in with a leave-in or detangler for slip. Work from the ends up to the roots. This helps prevent breakage and makes the process less painful. One thing I like to do is spread the hair flat across the palm of my hand and use a paddle or detangling brush starting from the ends and working my way up towards the roots. And as you can see, I'm holding the hair between my fingers to help reduce tension and tugging at the roots. It doesn't completely eliminate discomfort, but it can make detangling much gentler. Spreading the hair out across the palm also helps you see the tangles better, so you can brush through them more carefully instead of pulling through the hair aggressively. Wash days don't need to be complicated. A gentle shampoo and a good conditioner is enough. It's also helpful to use a tear-free shampoo, especially if your toddler is fussy or at the stage where they're standing in the shower. And if you want to keep things simple, you can also use a gentle body wash that doubles as a shampoo. You also don't need to shampoo multiple times. In most cases, one wash is enough. And if there's more buildup, you can go in a second time. Since toddlers are constantly refreshing, you're usually just washing away sweat and buildup. This can be done once or twice a week, and sometimes even less, depending on activity level. Conditioning should be the easiest part, especially if you were able to detangle beforehand. But if that didn't happen, don't panic. You can follow the same detangling process during this step. Just make sure you're adding water as you go, because conditioner works best when the hair is fully wet. The hair can start to dry as you move from one section to the next, so keep reapplying water and conditioner where needed, especially in more tangled areas. Work in sections and detangle from the ends up to the roots. This is also a good point where you can slightly rinse out the conditioner and leave a small amount in the hair. I used to do this when my toddler was younger, especially when his hair was shorter. It works really well for boys or toddlers with shorter hair, but it can also be helpful for longer hair because it allows the hair to stay hydrated and absorb more moisture. And remember, conditioner should be applied to the length of the hair, not directly on the scalp. Toddlers don't need heavy styling products. A leave-in or a light cream is usually enough. This keeps the hair soft without buildup. Save stronger hold for special occasions. And if you're not sure what to use, I have product ideas linked in the blog post that goes with this video. I usually like to apply the leave-in or cream I'm using on my toddler's hair towards the end of the shower, because sometimes once he's dressed, he does not want to sit still long enough for me to comb or style his hair. So applying the product while the hair is still wet can make the process a lot easier and faster. Detangling can be one of the most frustrating parts for both you and your toddler, but it's also an opportunity to start building a routine early on. Tender-headedness can make the process harder, but it's important to remember how sensitive their scalp is. And if something doesn't feel right, it's always okay to check in with your pediatrician or a dermatologist just to make sure there isn't an underlying condition causing discomfort. One way to make things easier is to stay consistent, doing their hair a little more frequently so knots don't build up. For my toddler, in between wash days, I'll use a detangling spray almost like a refresh, especially if I skip a wash that week. I focus on the areas that tend to tangle the most. Speak to him gently, and if I notice it's becoming too much, I stop and come back to it later. And sometimes it may also just be that they're not ready for longer hair at this stage. I actually had to cut my toddler's hair to shoulder length for that reason, because it was making wash days more complicated, and I didn't want him to start dreading bath time altogether. This helps keep the process manageable for both of you. As I mentioned earlier, refresh days are completely optional. You can skip them altogether, especially if your toddler doesn't wear their hair out every day. Or if needed, you can use a detangling spray between washes like I do, focusing only on the areas that need it. Toddlers usually don't need frequent shampooing or daily refreshing. The goal is just to keep their hair soft and manageable, not to restyle it every day. When it comes to a night routine, ideally a bonnet will help keep their hair in place, but not all toddlers are willing to wear one. My toddler, for example, has refused to wear anything on his head, even a winter hat, since he was a baby. So another option is to use a satin pillowcase or even satin bed sheets to help reduce friction and tangling. But even that is completely optional. For everyday styling, keep things simple. Loose puffs, braids, or low ponytails, these help reduce tangling and make mornings easier. But just as important, try to avoid putting too much tension on their scalp. Even as adults, if you wear your hair too tight, you can feel it. Headaches, scalp irritation, discomfort, and toddlers are even more sensitive. Their scalp isn't used to that kind of tension. So this isn't the stage to introduce tight styles. The goal is to keep their hair comfortable and manageable. As your toddler grows, their hair will change, and that's usually when you can start transitioning into regular kids' hair products. You'll notice their hair getting thicker, longer, and needing a bit more structure in the routine. And that's also when things like haircuts start to matter more. So in a future video, I'll show you how I trim and shape my son's curls in a simple way you can do at home. And I'll also be doing a part 2 where I go more in depth on curly hair care for older kids. But at the end of the day, this stage is really about keeping things simple, staying consistent, and working with your child, not against them. Because healthy curls at this stage don't come from doing more. They come from doing the right things gently and consistently. Be sure to check out the description box for the blog post that goes with this video, where I include product recommendations. And you can also check out my Pinterest for quick guides you can save for later. And let me know in the comments, what has been the hardest part for you when it comes to doing your baby or toddler's hair?